So in the second part of this Dark World video, I wanted to talk about the main stuff that'll be played because, well, the branded stuff will be really cool. Branded may get bumped on a little bit by then, but as far as this version, the Cerulli version mixed with Silva, being able to hand loop your opponent on the very first turn is really insane. Forcing your opponent into getting triple tactics talent because you're giving them a card on their side of the field is nuts. Brow and Beige being the cards that already exist that are definitely going to be in the modern version of the deck, and so much more to talk about, like the new interaction with Nekomane King and the fusion Grapha Overlord, because, well, let's face it, if you're forcing your opponent to discard from your hand and then immediately on their turn, end their turn, I think that's something that we have to take note of. Obviously, you have Silva being able to hand loop your opponent and take 2 cards from their hand and put them back into the deck as a powerful effect as well. But as far as most of the new stuff, as well as talking about the new news reporter, tour guide, support card that will also mix into the deck, guys, this deck is really dumb. We already talked about in the other day in another video, we already talked about the Dark World stuff mixing in with the branded stuff and how smooth that version is, and how the quick play can chain to Lebellion to give you 2 fusions for the price of 1, essentially, by using the 2 cards together. The reason why I wanted to talk about it in this capacity, guys, is because I believe you're going to have to explore a little bit how you want to play the deck. This branded version is pretty doggone good. I feel like I covered it well enough for people to kind of understand where I was coming from with the deck. I haven't really seen it on YouTube, and it was me just kind of starting to mess around with some stuff. I feel like you're going to have to make your mind up if you want to play Cerulli and Silva or committing to branded stuff. I feel like you're going to have to commit one way or the other, whichever version that you play. I feel like if you do play the Albaz version, you may want to consider playing 60 cards, adding cards like Trade In, cards like Drag Down into the Grave. Drag Down into the Grave is going to be a card that we have to talk about because simply looking at someone's hand is absolutely insane. And inside of today's meta where looking in someone's hand like that can actually occur, you definitely have a decided advantage on taking hand traps out of their hand and preempting any kind of Dark Ruler or potential card like Droplet that can potentially interrupt the fusion on their turn. If you have that with the Nekomane King and they can't Dark Rule you or Droplet you, you may have to play a card like Triple Tactics Talent. You may have to also play a card like Nekomane King just because it combos so well with the fusion and completely ends their turn. We'll get to that in a second. The baseline and the crux of everything, without me having to go over the combos, if you want to check that out, I've left multiple different Yu-Gi tubers with combo videos down in the description just to see all of this stuff play out. But all you're doing is dumping as many cards onto the field and then skull dreading twice. That's going to happen each and every time. One of the strategies that you get to play obviously is the Cerulli, the Guru, and Silva mixing with each other, giving your opponent a monster effect to activate, then trigger the Silva to be able to hand loop cards out of their hand, and being able to stack that on top of each other with cards like the Field Spell Gate, obviously getting cards out of your hand, to then set up Cerulli, to then set up Silva to take cards out of their hand. Definitely something powerful that you have to consider if you're considering variants. I'd say there's about 5 good ones, whether you're mixing Punk into the equation, heavy on the dangers, only worrying about specifically the Dark Worlds because the new support kind of left all of the other stuff that you didn't need to play, like the Punk stuff, kind of irrelevant, I think, guys. I'm still going to show it a little bit, but I definitely have to mention that all of this beforehand just to kind of make some sense. As far as the level 4s, there's a lot of level 4s in this deck, and I feel like if you want to focus with some of the dangers on the 3s, on the 4s, if you're using the 3s, you're thinking about the Phantom Knight stuff, the Cherubini, and playing into plays like that, which you can do with Dark World, but I like the level 4s for stuff like Dugaras, like Baguska, like Abyss Dweller, and so on and so forth. As far as showing the Punk stuff, obviously you guys know about Xiamen, special summoning itself off of a card like E-Telly, or just flat out summoning it because you don't really need your normal summon inside of Dark World to then get out some of the power cards like Foxy Tomb, and additionally opening up an insane card like the new Overlord card that is going to be in the structure deck, the Devil's Gate structure deck to be exact. Pitching it off of Foxy Tune is usually going to be the play just because you get to send it and then special summon out a card from your deck, which is almost always 100% of the time going to be a Deer Note. and then being able to bring back the Xiamen and go either into an 8 after you've done this, or the Foxy Tune itself to overlay into the Vampire Exceed that is so very, very good right now. And then having so many darks in your graveyard, Grapha to be able to special summon itself back. You obviously have Zephyros being a good tech inside of the deck. Armageddonite is something you're going to have to consider as well. This is what I mean by so many options, guys. But I definitely feel like the baseline is the most important. And this is definitely stuff that you kind of have to know. You already saw this probably if you've been researching the deck already on Yassine's channel. This is just showing when you set the quick play itself is a power interruption. No matter what they usually have on their side of the field, your opponent's always going to have some kind of setup play. Maybe it's a Vashuda into a Monk, or you're setting up some of the Tinyi stuff, or maybe you're playing against Salamangreat and they normal summon Spinny because they open horribly or something, and then they go into a Balinx and then the Spinny is in the grave. At both of these junctures, the quick play is a fusion spell, and it also discards and triggers both of the effects, one being a snow, to then put a silver inside of your hand, and the Grapha to pop by coming out of the grave. So off of the quick play alone, opening those 2 cards or any other type of other Dark Worlds that may be able to facilitate some power plays, get silver into your hand. All of these are really, really good, guys. I just feel like some of these new power cards intentionally made with the specific, I'm just frustrated. Crystal Beast was trash, and this stuff is really, really good. It seems like Konami sometimes puts their energy into the cards that they want to succeed instead of trying to make a lot of decks more competitive. In this combo, opening up both of the Graphas, the big one, the old school one, and the new school one, the Overlord guy, to then be able to add additionally off of the new guy a level 5 or higher. You essentially have a baseline combo even in opening up the quick play to be able to trigger it, special summon out the silver by discarding it, by adding it back, then bouncing the silver back to your hand. The quick play gets to add itself back. The new Overlord gets to add himself back, and you get to loop card advantage. This is where the card advantage and the silly amount of plays begins to come out on the field because, well, basically the Graphas spin off of each other and special summon themselves back onto the field and set up your opponent on their turn to both give you a body with the silver, or potentially in their turn if one of those cards is a Necromane King. Especially if you've dug for it. You may only need to play one of a card like that because, well, let's face it, you don't want to overdraw it, but if you do draw it and you zap your opponent with the fusion, forcing your opponent to discard a card from your hand, I definitely think that's something that's going to be extraordinarily relevant and extraordinarily meta. This is just goofing around with the deck. I could talk about it all day long. I could show you combos all day long. Definitely irritating without EDO Pro on my modern computer because, well, let's face it, it's easier to get games on there and have better replay value, but essentially just messing around with the deck, going halfway into the combo, having a card like Triple Tactics Talent because you're getting the special summon cards like Guru onto their side of the field, or you're forcing your opponent to interact with you. If they try anything with the fusion on the field, you get to force another talents. Is either making your opponent not be able to do anything with what you're doing, or force them to play cards like Droll and Lockbird, or very, very powerful hand traps are going to be forced into the meta because of this deck. And that's why I feel like this deck is going to matter and definitely be meta, or at least very, very powerful rogue, although it's very, very long way away. Now again, I could talk all day about different variants. If you want to play the silver hand loop stuff, you would just need to try to get it as close to 40 as you could and take some of these cards out. If you wanted to play Silva and Ceruli, that's 6 slots. I feel like you could get away with 1 or 2 Silvas and then 3 of the Guru. So that would definitely add at least 3 or 4 cards. If you wanted to at least add that to this, it's very easy to do. But I feel like this is a really, really easy baseline where you can play cards like beginning to the end and not brick on them necessarily. You can also play tour guide stuff to go into Rusty Bardiche and some of the other plays, because really, really powerful level 3s that you get to special summon out to get to add level 8s to your hand, like this Doom Dog Octros, immediately putting cards in your hand that are level 8 Fiend type monsters. I definitely think that's something interesting to special summon off of tour guide. You obviously can't forget about Armageddonite, Destrudo, Riser Dragon. That goes into a whole nother line of players. This is the most basic baseline that I could come up with that would make a little bit of sense. Again, adding in the guru stuff, I feel maybe win more, but I definitely feel like if you want to do it and you commit to it, you can 100% hand loop your opponent a very high percentage of the time, because this deck is so consistent, because of the amount of dangers are in the deck and the multiple effects to get to trigger off, whether you discard a danger or a Dark World, it doesn't really matter. Fable stuff, as far as other stuff to mess around with, maybe Rusty Bardiche mixed with the Shade Brigandine to go into easy plays, easy level 4s. Phantom Sky Blaster is another card down there. Multiple Halka Fibrax plays. When you special summon back the Punk stuff, if you wanted to go into that, if you're playing the Punk version, the baseline version, the Punk version, there is so much to cover as far as this deck is concerned. I really feel like it's better off just talking about cards like this. We didn't even talk about cards like Trade-In to mix in with some of the level 8s that you would play if you want to go heavy on the level 8 packages as far as the dangers are concerned. Again, guys, Avarice is another tech. Drag Down in the Grave is another card that you may need to talk about, because, well, let's face it, looking at someone's hand in today's meta is really, really strong, as I said before. This is just a pile of cards. This is the standard that I would at least start with and then go from there. Rhino Saber is another card inside the extra deck that could just discard an entire handful of Dark Worlds, trigger all of them, and then give you an OTK machine on the field. But you'd have to play a card like this Strudel, and with that, guys, there is all day that I could talk about these power cards. Let me know what you think about Dark World down in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Pegasus signing out. Arrivederci.